Good morning, handsome.
Hey, Curt. How you
How
doing?
are you?
I'm okay. I don't,
What's that?
I'm okay.
Oh, I better bring my microphone over here. There we go.
There you go. I'm trying to figure out how to shore up to the processing of information at the rate that I'm doing it. It's challenging, increasingly challenging.
You mean the rate of personal reorganization of your thought is going on is challenging, or the rate at which you're trying to consume information is challenging? What do you mean?
I'm trying to write a white paper, and I'm interacting with those guys, all the good guys, and it's like, okay, they're flooding the zone with all kind of crazy things. I'm like, okay, I don't know how to process all that information. I'm like, and I'm in the milieu, the certain historical circumstances we find ourselves in at the moment. It's like, okay, process all that, guys. Let's go. Yeah, it's kind of an urgent situation too. So it's like, okay, just a lot of information to process and live through. So it's challenging on a multitude of levels at the same time. That's all. That leaves you cold. That's kind of funny.
No, I'm just trying to think if I can contribute anything to anything that doesn't sound trivial. But I mean, if you aren't overloaded and confused right now, you're oblivious. Right? I mean, there's just, it's right on schedule. It's 2022.
Right.
Right? I mean, it's right on schedule. COVID probably brought it up a couple of years. Could have been 2025. At the outside, it would have been 2030. I'm a first mover, so I thought it would be closer to 2020. So I mean, but cyclically, this had to happen because we've just sort of been coasting because our method of government is reactive, not proactive. So I mean, where we are today was, as we've all said, completely predictable. Deterministic is the correct term. So it was predictable. You can't predict the you can only predict that change will come toward a deterministic end. You can't predict the precise events that will provide the awareness and incentive, right? Because there might be a field of 100 or maybe not that many of 20 or 30 categories of events that could bring about the deterministic outcome. You can't predict those. You can only predict that some set of these potentials will produce the deterministic outcome. Normally you go for the two most obvious, which are strategic reorganization, economic reorganization, demographic reorganization, or war. Those are the four primary things, and the fifth one, of course, is technological revolution. Though technological revolution tends, unless it's in warfare, tends to be provide you with cover, so it's usually beneficial rather than harmful.
Yeah.
So I mean, we're just going through what we expected to go through on the schedule. Most of us expected. I'm glad Turchin basically made a science of it finally. Because in the end, it's just demographics, right? So if you're not overwhelmed right now, you've got to be oblivious because it's overwhelming.
It is, and it's like the issue is, how do you personally process it as information inside your life, right? It's like, okay, that's what I'm talking about. It's like there's I'm not sleeping enough is kind of what it comes down to. It's this stuff.
I mean, I don't sleep either, but then it's, for me, this is largely this is personal because I consider myself Ukrainian. And in the sense of, I have a lot of, I've sort of went native. So this is a personal issue to me. It's also personal to me because I love Russian culture. And so, I see two things I value being destroyed right now. And then I see the conflict on the here, which is the left is opposing Russia for the wrong reasons, and the right is advancing Russia for the wrong reasons. And when all of these are statements of mommy, daddy, you're strong, come help me with my initiative. And I just like, well, if you're incompetent enough to need mommy and daddy, why does your opinion matter? So I don't know. I'm kind of exasperated by the whole thing and somebody said something very smart the other day that says, Curt, you're the last generation that was taught aristocracy, and it's true. And I'm from New England, so I don't know where it was taught elsewhere. I'm from an old blue-blooded New England family. Of course I was taught aristocracy, but in my view, it ended with my father's generation, because of the first generation to outbreed. So, we lost our Boston Brahmins became American Jews, right? I mean, they essentially the same thing. The German Jews were becoming indistinguishable from Scottish, what do you call them? Not Puritans, Protestants.
Mhm.
And in the post-war period, that beautiful coalescence that was happening was interrupted by the pseudoscience that was brought to America by the Frankfurt School. So sorry, I actually feel pretty good today.
Oh yeah.
I'm talking with low energy. I don't know why. I feel pretty good.
It's all right.
I think I'm okay.
You think you're okay? That's 90% of the battle.
So you had some things you wanted to warm up with today.
Well, I'm working on this. I kind of cold. I slept in, so I didn't do my normal routine, waking up, running early this morning.
Oh, have I got the jump on you this
A
morning?
little bit. It's like
I don't know if I got the energy to take advantage of it and abuse you, but I'll try to find that if I get a second.
Well, I'm kind of like it's an interesting process because I'm trying to craft a narrative. I listened to Jordan Peterson. This was quite interesting. Jordan Peterson was talking in one of the little clips I listened to yesterday, and he said that science will never defeat religion. I'm like, that's an interesting premise. I have to listen to that. And he wasn't talking about science. He was talking about corrupted science, which is PhD students not caring about the paper that they publish because they need to publish to get out.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, that's not science.
No.
And the narrative is what he's talking about as religion. I'm like, well, I think they need to work together and be proper, and that will be okay.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, my view is the church blew it. I think we've been over this now. Every time we say it, maybe like one or two people in the audience incrementally get it. So if we say it a few thousand times, it might eventually get across. But the church basically fucked up in response to Darwin. They doubled down when they should have said, see, we were right. Right? If they'd have just continued with the Thomist project and said, see, we were right. They would have been freaking fine. If there had been one guy to come up with the same argument I did, which is that natural law is just God's law. So it just,
Right.
then, and there's no difference between our understanding of God's law and science, except for the way we describe it as God's voice or our measurements. They would have had it, and they would have just claim fucking victory. But no, that was too much of a leap, because they are too dependent upon creating dependence.
Okay.
So yeah, I just think it bears. So I will try to take the inner energy I actually have
Yeah.
and make it come out my mouth. I will try. It's not working quite yet. Maybe I need more coffee. But in any event, the point being is relatively simple, that it's taken me a long time to get there, but I believe the problem is we haven't created a new religion. There was a beautiful religion of American religion, consisted of really God, guns, and Constitution, right? That's a really, really good religion.
Right.
Because they're all the same thing, really. Individual responsibility for the state, that's stated in the Constitution, and God is the originator of both. And Christianity as the forgiveness of the as the forgiveness that makes us all customers of one another. So I think we had this religion damn near down. The thing is, a religion of responsibility, right? And there's an awful lot of the world that doesn't want a religion of responsibility. See, we had bait.
Like it's religion of responsibility sounds expensive compared to the pseudo religion of irresponsibility.
Yeah, exactly. You don't get to blame anybody else. But the thing is, you get respect and mindfulness for responsibility. It's the only non-false method of obtaining mindfulness. And so it's intellectually healthy. So the problem is that if you have an aristocracy that people are trying to join and imitate, and that aristocracy is keeping in place, whichever order you want to put them in, guns, Constitution, and God, you've pretty much got you've got a class system someone can aspire to. But if you're bringing a new priestly class that tells you can aspire to be the priestly class by claiming you're oppressed, then of course, when you're not oppressed, it's just the laws of nature can't oppress you.
It is an interesting thing. It's like there is a religion that has been generated that with the priestly class that is of the impression that priests are generated by credentialism, and we can generate you as a priest. We can make you into a priest too, and we're going to do it with equity, right?
Right, and they do it by social construction with falsehood, right? This
Right.
religion, which is the thing we've got to put in the Constitution, which is that a religion consists of a social construction of falsehood that promises evasion of the four laws, any of the four laws of the universe.
4 laws of what?
The universe, four sciences. The laws of the 4 sciences: the formal law, meaning logical, truth, testimony, the physical, the behavioral, and the evolutionary. Before, during, and after.
All right. I have to write down the time stamp on that one because I didn't get it all. I can't write as fast as you can talk still, and that's some said failing.
I just repeat myself a lot. I find that seems to be more effective, even with you, who I consider pretty amazing.
I try to write it down, and I'm like, shit. I'll just go back and get it later.
I just repeat. I have this philosophy of the one-room schoolhouse is more effective. Because like for me as a kid growing up, if I'd have been able to hear the kids 2 years ahead of me, that would have been fine. I'm not socially mature enough to interact with them. Right. So I love the one room schoolhouse because, which is what we do. And that's what Martin does. He runs a one room schoolhouse on freaking Telegram. Right. I mean, it doesn't matter where you are. You learn from the other kids more so than the teacher. Right. And so, I know that would have been better for almost everyone. There's some people who need direct teaching, right? Just do this over and over and over again. And some of us just need to hear it, right, from somebody in whatever stage our mind it is. And some of us need to hear it 50 fucking times before it penetrates. Okay, but it does penetrate. But I mean, if you look at the people who follow us, eventually the light bulb goes on, right? They find all these pieces. Like, yeah, that sounds right. This sounds right, but this doesn't, I don't get it. They can't put it together. And then for some reason, the number of pieces connect and they say, oh, I get it.
Right.
I wish I could figure out how to get people there faster.
I don't know that there it may not be like a single operating method that works, because it may be there's it's like the attraction of certain word sets and the pre-existing condition of their mind.
Yeah, in other words, they have some pattern in there and it's idiosyncratic, and the only way you're reaching them is idiosyncratically. Right? You have to discover whatever pattern they can grasp, and
what you do is you keep on throwing spaghetti at the wall, and eventually it makes words. And they recognize it, and they're interested enough to watch the show to gather the pieces as it assembles into a final process, I guess.
Yeah, but this is the same thing. Once they get it, it's like, wow, it's really simple.
It's not that hard, but it's really hard. I'm like this. I'm like, it doesn't sound that hard until I'm like, I accepted the challenge to write this white paper. And I'm like, okay, make it coherent and understandable and make it work on paper is hard.
Yes.
That's a job. And I'm like, okay. Because I'm just presenting a thumbnail of it. And I'm like, okay.
That's just the problem I have, is that in order to teach it like an onion, peeling away a layer at a time, you have to teach a lot. So what you really want to do is find something that the group you're talking to can understand, and then find them a way, from the inside of the onion out. Right? It's just very hard to find a way to get through to some people. Because what you're really trying to do is overcome our natural intuition to just jump to a conclusion that makes sense to us. Right? It's very hard to teach somebody to abandon intuition in favor of reason.
That's it.
And that also requires that people are capable of doing it. Now we know that following chains of reasoning, basic induction and deduction, become increasingly difficult as IQ declines below 100, 105 really. And you get the odd person down there with a 90 IQ who gets this stuff, and why? Because they have low agreeableness personality, so they're not influenced by whether people like something or not.
Oh.
Right, so they have a lesser resistance to maintain intuition. But once you get the opposite of that, you get the female intuition, which is you immediately solve for desirability, whether it's true or not.
Oh, that's a very, very unusual construction there.
It's almost impossible to overcome that, because their entire system of decidability is based on a falsehood.
The desirability as a measure.
Right. It's not a measure of knowing the truth is just telling you what exists. Once you know what exists, then you can come up with some set of exchanges.
I'm fighting the desire to call you a Nazi right now. Because it is, it's like, it's like this, because I can see the people they got to jump to a conclusion, and it's like, must be a Nazi.
Well, I mean,
because
it's
I don't
just
like
like,
the answer we're coming to, that I can't find a way to disagree with. Must be a Nazi.
yeah, exactly. No, categorically, I would be classified as a libertarian. How do you construct a trade? I don't say what would be good for all,
Right?
or what would be good for my tribe. I don't say that. I just say, how would we construct a trade? That's just inconceivable. Inconceivable.
I just am empathizing with the virtue signal jumper, because there has to be a switch going on in their head. They have to arc. They're trying to arc. They're trying to skip the valley so they get to the next mountaintop. And it's like, that's not desirable where this trail is going. So therefore, it must be going south.
It's because they feel themselves in moral conflict. And so they're trying to find moral justification, which just means they're confirmation bias seeking. Right. And so the problem is, if you have that person and you can't get that person to seek the truth, such that from the truth we can determine an exchange, or a compromise exchange, same thing.
Right.
Then you can't actually negotiate with that person. So people who get involved in moral outrages are basically just saying they're children, or they're not adults. They're unfit for political discourse.
Right. There's no question about it. It's like, it's a straight thing. It's like, if you wish to have a tantrum because of this, go to your room and come back when you're calm.
Exactly.
If you wish to participate in an adult conversation.
And people wonder why I get mad, right? It's because, of course, I get mad because I just see I just see the dishonesty behind it all. Now people say, well, they're not dishonest. They're just, they're just monkeys. I'm like, but you entered a conversation with me under the pretense that you had the knowledge to disagree with me. You don't, you're, you know what I mean?
You lied.
You lied. Why am I supposed to not be? The fact that you didn't do the due diligence to verify that you had the knowledge to be able to participate in the conversation means you've been indoctrinated into lying. What am I supposed to do? Treat you with respect? I mean, you're just another freaking criminal. You don't realize you're a criminal, right? Because we haven't normalized the fact that pretense of knowledge in matters to the public, in public, of matters public, is criminal. But you're a criminal. Now, what we've done, though, is that's what woke did. That's what they told people, the female, that your opinion, you have a right to be heard. No, you don't. You have a right to contribute truthful reciprocal discourse to an exchange for the benefit of the group. But you don't have a right to just sit there and fucking, say meaningless stuff or deceitful stuff or stuff you can't warranty. I mean, that's why there's a reason. I'm going to say this just to get someone's go. There's a reason women's testimony doesn't count very much in history. Is because you can't count on their testimony. Well, there's a reason why children's testimony doesn't count much in history. You can't count on their testimony.
Well, they don't have agency. They can't provide consent at some age. You have, like, legally, they can't, their mind is not formed enough to perform in a legal manner.
And so what we did is we lowered the standard of logic in order to allow women into the discourse.
When you say that, what exactly do you mean? Lowered the standard of logic?
We allowed gossiping, railing, shaming, moralizing, undermining, ridiculing into a conversation where previously such tactics were dual worthy.
I see. that was an interesting conversational point was brought up in textual format this week, which is so the feminine or the female bias is overly represented in our public spaces now, which we were not prepared to deal with, and that you either have to suppress them or you unrestrain the male, which is to say make dueling legal again. And it's like, and that will tamp it down by reciprocal relaxation of restraint on the male aggressive behaviors.
Yeah, well, it used to be you're responsible for your wife and your daughter and your sisters and whatever. Well, that really means is that I can't beat your wife and your daughter, but I'm going to kick your ass for not, for not containing them, because the female method of warfare was not allowed in the public discourse. Because it's the only means by which we women conduct warfare is by undermining. And what is prohibited under reciprocity and sovereignty, reciprocity, truth, and duty. It's the undermining is prohibited. You can fight, you can go to court, you can exit, but you can't undermine, because undermining hurts the group. It doesn't. It's not about the individual, and it's not true. Now you can go out and say this person's a criminal because they are, but you can't just play GSSRM games with them without getting into a duel. And a duel is a very effective means of preventing GSRM. I mean, it would never occur to me to say anything to a man, right, that would be undermining, unless we were already established that this is a matter for truthful negotiation. I mean, I just wouldn't do that. I mean, there's certain things you do in negotiation and business conflict, right? And there's certain things you don't do in public matters. Because in your public matter, talking to an ordinary guy, in a public forum, you're threatening his honor.
Right.
Usually when you're in business, what you're doing is you're in parley, you're negotiating on behalf of others. Does that make sense?
Right.
And so we're aware that men are aware that they're negotiating on behalf of others. So this is what's expected of them, right, to do this. So there's a certain, it's not necessarily forgiveness. There's a certain duty going on both sides. And you're just trying, all you're doing is, this is really what happens. I put out my words that are dutifully representing my side.
Right.
You come back and falsify my thing, but I've done my duty, right? I made my case. You defeated my case. You come out with your duty. I defeat yours. And so what happens is, over this process, we've done our duty for our constituencies, right? But then now we have the freedom to negotiate. But if you don't do your duty on behalf of your people, you've never got the guy, either party in the parlay, able to negotiate in good faith on behalf of both parties. So we think of it as this adversarial thing, but what's really going on is you're giving each other permission by falsifying each other's irreciprocities. You're putting each other in an position of empowerment to negotiate on behalf of your parties.
Right.
It's harder for women to understand because they don't have this back of their mind. I could get killed for this, or I could get my face beat in for this, right? Or these guys will come after me for the rest of my life.
It is an interesting function there.
Excuse me, women do the opposite. They assume because men pander to them all the time, that man will pander to them in this circumstance. So women can get away with a lot more in negotiation. And so at least for me, what I do is I don't let them get away with it. Right. And I may, if this is, you're going to argue with me equal, you're going to treat you as an equal. And you just call them out on every time they try to do it. And some women are capable of it. They're just, what happens is they end up being nasty.
Ones that can't process.
No, it's not all of them, but you do end up with women who can't make a negotiation because they can't understand that part of the negotiation is to produce a condition of loyalty. Women don't do loyalty. They wonder why they're not paid as much as you go up the spectrum. Because you know what you're paid for as you go up the compensation spectrum? Loyalty. In other words, the ability to absorb harm on behalf of the team. Women never absorb harm.
There you go.
It's not that all positions require that. There are some women, and they're quite competent, who end up getting in negotiations, but they're good at negotiations in a customer service venue where you're trying to find, so you're trying to seek to understand and negotiate a preference between people who are having trouble communicating. But that's why you notice that men negotiate high risk propositions and women negotiate customer service propositions, and we tend to sort into those two basic things. The higher the risk, the more likely it's going to be a man, and the higher the service required, the more likely it's going to be a woman. And this is just what happens at the extremes. And so you have, the problem is at the extremes, it's only men like that. I mean, I fucking love negotiating like that. Right. I mean, I absolutely, it's the most fun thing in the world is to do big deals, because for me, I just drive for what's truth, right? Seek to understand, drive for what's true, and not be greedy. Develop some sort of thing where the other party knows they're just not trying to be selfish. You're trying to find mutual shared interest, and that you're prohibiting them from doing any kind of greed. And once you realize that they don't give up on that, then you realize it's not a fit. But there's some people who do. I could give you some great examples, with certain company names, and I've been called very bad names by some of these people, because I get angry and I get hostile, and I say, I'm not going to put up with your shit. And you do that when you can only do that when you're like the CEO, because then you have all this staff that's trying to be nice to each other. But when the staff on both sides is trying to be nice to each other and they're not getting to the end, it's because they're putting the being nice to each other ahead of the goal. So I come in and I'm exceptionally good at being an asshole, which you can imagine. And I just drive everybody to, this is unacceptable. This is what you're doing. Just lay the truth out there, right? And they'll change their behavior. I've been excluded from certain negotiations within my own company by my own board, specifically for that reason.
Wow. Just keep them away from it. It's too hot.
Because sometimes the other party is so either broken or confused that truth actually doesn't help. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Right. You're trying to negotiate a field of landmines, and it's not about truth. It's about this deal has to get done. So, it's like arguing with Kissinger. It must be fucking hysterical. I've always wanted to meet him. He's going to die before I get a chance. But I always want to meet Kissinger because he cracks me up when he negotiates. It's so obvious to me what he's doing, but I just want to be in the room while he's doing it, because I would sort of absorb some of his mind while it was working. and that's the best way for me to learn is to observe somebody better than I am doing it. But I always want to be in the room with Kissinger. And there's other guys I just don't care about. Like, who's the guy that Trump uses? Guy with a big bushy mustache. Starts with a B. I can't. Anyway, he's a notorious asshole. And I've always wanted to just be in the room. Well, I just like to work on his team, right? For a couple of deals so I could internalize his clock. But he's just incredible. Oh, God damn, I can't bring it up, Slippy. Bolton.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's just such an asshole. And then there's like the politicrat negotiators, right? They just use process to wear things down. I've got the patience for that. I mean, I admire people who can do it, but that's not how I work. Anyway, well, we got off on a tangent there.
It's all right. It's
you had things you wanted to cover today.
No, not really. I'm just absorbing passively at the moment. I'm ready to proceed to the law at will. I'm trying to I'm processing information into the narrative structure of the white paper that I'm writing, and I'm like, okay, I don't know exactly. There's
Okay. So let's talk about this, because we've tried to make this argument a couple of times. I was trying to hit at this earlier. What question are you trying to answer in the white paper? Other than why is Curt such an asshole?
That's a side point. And I'm deflecting that one, and I choose to avoid that subject.
In my life, people think I'm a nice guy.
I know. I know the people that I'm talking about, the ones that are I believe your name will act as like some form of repellent, and that's okay. So no, I'm trying to
Darwin's still a repellent for the fundamentalists.
I suppose he is, which is okay. So the issue is in my mind is it's the center left people that are of the significance, the people that think they're neutral and that consider themselves to be rational, that are capable of an adult conversation. Those are the people that I'm trying to
yeah, they're the only one. They're the only ones left that matter, because they're the only adults left in the room. It's like everybody else has gone mad.
Right. So I'm trying to craft the narrative in a pattern that they will recognize as reasonable and that they can tolerate to read it. And then that will be sufficient in my mind.
It's very hard to see people who decide by agreeable versus disagreeable instead of true versus false, to understand a frame of logic, the purpose of which is to eradicate bias from the discourse. It's just contrary to them. So for them, they're assuming our attempt to produce, or my attempt to produce, a system of measurement is to produce a conservative end. When it's to produce a balanced scale, a libertarian end, where we produce compromises, trades between the center right and the center left, thereby ameliorating the potential damage of the hard right and hard left. So they're going to assume that any pursuit of truth that says anything unpleasant is other than illustrating the problem for both sides. Right.
Right.
And so that's what they're going to do. And so it's very hard to get them to understand that this is just science. That's all it is. But just like chemistry, you can use chemistry to create nifty things, or you can use chemistry to create evil things. Right? It's the same fucking thing. It's just chemistry. This is the laws of the universe, and you can use it to create good things or bad things. What you can also do is use it to prohibit bad things and leave only good things.
Right.
So it's very hard for them to look at truth first instead of desirability first. What they want to do is evade any potential chance of disapproval or ostracization or conflict that would add friction that they needed to overcome. They want to eliminate the first step, right? Because it's contentious. Whereas what we do is we deal with the contentious first step, right? Eliminating the negatives. You can't claim that heterogeneity is a good thing. You can't claim that multiculturalism is a good thing. You can, however, claim that some cities who prefer this, there will be people who will prefer this because it provides a great deal of discounts on certain kinds of mindfulness. So I understand completely that why you would want to do that. So it's not that we need to be universal. It just means that some places need to have very permissive behaviors because they're individually hyperconsumptive, and the vast majority of places need to have impermissive behaviors because they're hyper reproductive. In other words, we have to put the family first and put the lowest cost on raising the family because families are expensive. There's a reason cities are ovary graveyards. There's a reason that cities are hyperconsumptive. There's a reason that cities are expensive. But there's not much of a reason anymore why economics should be concentrated in a city.
Right.
So I don't see this continuing. And so what I'm worried about, which is most likely, is that cities will become priesthood favelas, and other new cities will emerge that are the high quality, high trust, family oriented, right? And I think that's the future, is that those two places will go. And how will happen, of course, is over time, given the choice, people gravitate to the place with the highest quality commons in one end, and other one will people migrate to the highest quality hedonism on the other. Whereas hedonism includes the lack of production of responsibility. So, I mean, you should get what we see. You should get South America, right, for some cities, and you should get Germany for other cities, or the Netherlands is probably even the best example. And it will all be due to the amount of costs people are willing to bear, right? Largely, those costs are going to be psychological and emotional. What costs are they willing to bear in order to have the commons they prefer? It's just all it is. Now, we can try to say everybody should do this because, of course, that's what the herd wants, because they're terribly afraid of making the wrong choice and being left behind. But they are going to make the wrong choice and be left behind. But they're only be left behind if we don't separate. In other words, if we separate, it's hard to be left behind because the two spectrums will still produce the two goods that both markets desire and will benefit by trade. All right, so I can trade by moving my body over to, I mean, if I want to live in, I'm not really into the Amsterdam thing. I think it's kind of creepy, but I mean, if you're into that shit, fine. I'd rather live in some puritanical town in Germany where everybody has very good manners. But if you want to be high and be able to go to street prostitutes, and then Amsterdam is your place, right? And if you realize that Amsterdam only works because it's surrounded by high trusts, oppressive Germans, right? Right, that police it so that it's limited. And you think that you can build a world of Amsterdams, well, you're of course wrong, because that's just gonna lead to total disorder. So they have to think in terms of systems rather than universals, and I don't believe they can. Now they can, or they might be afraid of it. Right? They can't tolerate a world of, well, they call it a world of differences, but of course they're wrong. What they mean is a world of hedonism where it's unregulated. They don't want to see capitalization of commons, just like Marxists don't want to see capitalization of private property, because any capitalization means they're deprived of a hyperconsumption available to them. So, it's not like they're conscious actors. They're just bots. Very few of us. I mean, it's like, how many people are, have the personality trait of reasonably high intelligence, right? High openness, right? Low agreeableness, and some degree of conscientiousness. I mean, low neuroticism. But how many of us? I mean, it's fucking 0.5%. Right? I mean, it's just, there's a very small number of us fit for politics, really. At least politics in the sense of decidability. In other words, making decisions that are unbiased.
Right. So executive function.
Mhm. It's hard to develop executive function. I mean, I have a vague idea how you did it, right? I'm sort of fucking autistic. I don't have any, it's not that I have executive function, it's that I have OCD that forces me to have executive function in order to not have a nervous breakdown.
It's all right. It's all right.
Yeah, my daughter was talking about how hard it is to have executive function growing up as a kid. And I'm like, well, that's because you tried to do what other people wanted you to do. And I just didn't. I just did what I thought was helping me, and that turned out to be a better algorithm. Right? Fundamentally, the only reason for me to go to school was I liked it, but I would have learned everything anyway. So, it just depends.
Very good.
So, anyway, we start. I'm sorry, I went down a.
No, it's good. It's an interesting discourse. It's productive for me.
So now that I've sort of touched on the problem of, will they tolerate truth? How do in the first place? What's in the program that helps us create this question of truth? Right? We're trying to find a way to help people negotiate across the spectrum by limiting them to truthful reciprocal discourse. And people want to lie, cheat, and steal. That's what's going on.
Wait, and they don't want to admit it.
And they don't want to admit it. And they may not even know that's what they're doing. So, when you say, well, what's in the program? I mean, we've covered what's in the program. I can go over it again, but it's just, you're asking, what are we about? It's driving people to voluntarily cooperate by truthful reciprocal means. In order to force people into doing trades and exchanges, which is different from compromise, right? A compromise is a kind of an exchange, but most of the time the problem is, once both sides want something, that forces a cost on the other. Most of the time, it's people with higher agency, right, or higher productivity, who want to have stable behavior so they can work on long-term goods, versus hyper-consumptive people who want to maximize their novelty, their consumption, their novelty. So this is the correct interpretation of liberal versus conservative. It's novelty in time versus capital over time, or consumption in time versus capital over time. And the most interesting part of it is that those people with the lowest agency seek the greatest contribution of entertainment from interpersonal action. It's really cheap novelty. Whereas people conservative tend to be producers. Like, find some conservative guy, he's always got a craft or some hobby or some goddamn thing, right? Because he gets his joy out of productivity, not consumption.
Hmm.
So this is just the difference. But these are just sex differences in development expressed through various personality types. And personality types are just variations on sex differences in information processing.
That's right.
So when you what you're trying to drive people is, what are we about? That's what we're about. We're about ending lying, cheating, and stealing, so that we can conduct truthful reciprocal exchanges, most of which will result in conservative exchange of a resource or income for liberal constraint on hedonism. In other words, it's material for behavioral, which is just parenting. I mean, and that's what they can't stand. It's just fucking parenting.
It would
Think of it, your wife. My wife is always trying to figure out how to keep the kid busy so they're not annoying. So they want to subject them to a lot of let's take them there. Let's take them there. What they're really saying is, I want something to distract the kids so that I don't have to devote all my energy to entertaining and educating them, right? But they say, I want my kid to have a fulfilled life. What you really mean, of course, is that you just want the burden of having this annoying thing terrorizing you all day long. Okay, well, these are just two forms of parenting. The liberals are trying to entertain the children by giving them novelties that maintain their ability to seduce and interact with them. Conservatives are saying, I'm just trying to limit your consumption so that I can continue production, because production is very far harder than consumption. Now, nobody thinks about this. It's just fucking botware in our genes, right? I mean, it's, as I've said, it's nothing or nothing that isn't caused by minor differences in neural organization during early development. Organization, and I always leave the quality off there. Organization and quality of development. Why did you give me that look?
It's this quality thing. I'm like, I find it interesting. It's
quality.
Well, it goes to quality, and it's similar. It's like that. It's okay. I'm there.
I love people. There's these things, undersea cables, right?
Okay.
And there's a great math to the loss of information on an undersea cable. That's what we came up with it from. Turns out your neurons work by the same goddamn mathematics. So your overall health, oxygenation, liquid, neural density, biochemistry, whatever, your whole, and it's a really complex thing in your head, right? I mean, when I say the process is simple, but the biomechanics to make it all work, all the neurochemistry that's going on up there, that's not simple. That's billions of years of evolution,
right?
Right, working, right? I mean, so I'm like, quality varies a lot. Quality varies because of developmental issues. Notice, I mean, how long you're baked in the womb, like the
right.
Timing matters. You don't want to be early and you don't want to be late. You want to be on time, right? The time you're baked in the womb matters. The shocks that happened to your mother while you were in the womb matters. The infections that happened during and after birth matter. But your genetics matter a whole lot, because precisely because a lot of things have to go right for nothing to go wrong up there, right? And so we get this pretty wacky normal distribution, but that normal distribution is all affecting one thing: the math of that cable resistance.
I liken it to firmware, right? That's hardware that you're talking about. That's a hardware problem.
That's a hardware problem. Now, the firmware, of course, is that people don't think of the DNA cellular cell as a dance.
Yeah.
Right. So the state of any cell forms a dance with the DNA to produce what it needs, and the state of cells differs as each cell migrates, right? And is evolved. This whole thing is so magical; it's incomprehensible, right? This is where I see divinity in the complexity of that magic, right? I mean, it's just
That's right. It's stable enough to persist, right?
It's fucking amazing to me, right? I mean, just it's amazing that life can grow all this fucking complexity out of what is a really dumb algorithm with a 4-bit math. I mean, it just amazes me, right? So, but there's this dance going on there. But of course, during development, a couple of things happen. I mean, when you're especially along the sex bias difference, because you're really telling the body to work 2 directions, right? It's like you want to be now and feel, or act and fast, right? I mean, right? So we have men are at the end of the spectrum, right? We at both ends, and women are sort of in the middle, right? And it's like, and you can see that in the IQ distributions, right? So the problem for men is that we're like all these specialized machines, right? And women are not really. They're kind of general machines, and your brain is just, when it's growing, the reward that your neural economy, in other words, the highways in your head that are forming as you're in the womb, as you go along, they're to help your body coordinate, right? Right. That's what. And so what happens is the sex differences in that coordination show up too, but it's still regulated by the cable law, right? Which is, what's the resistance to this over this much time?
Right.
So some of us, it's like, okay, well, as long as I get oxygen and eat enough protein, I'm pretty scary. And others of us are like struggling to remember which sock goes on which foot. Doesn't matter.
But that conversational bit struck me as interesting. The premise that all individuals start out as female form until the male form gets expressed as a overriding influence.
I think it's actually an underwriting, but yeah.
Overwriting.
To make a male, you turn off.
Okay.
It's more that it's more like a down regulation. I used to say that, think of it as testosterone as a poison.
Okay.
And that inhibits certain categories of development, leaving only other categories of development available. That's an exaggeration, but it helps make the point for people. It's obviously far more complicated than that. But if you can go, some of us remember the feeling of sexual maturity, how it changed our thinking. Like for me, it did. I mean, I can remember it. I can go there. And it became very clear to me that things were being turned off. Right.
Huh.
Right. And so that things were certain sensitivities were being turned off. And so growth is now directed to something else. So we keep forgetting that there's a constant supply of energy to a body that's growing. In other words, we don't, everything comes from somewhere. So if you're going to change something, it has to come from somewhere. Right. And so like our head comes from shrinking our digestive system. Right. Right. And our energy processing comes at the cost of starvation. So everything comes at a cost. So the same. So when you forget that when you're making a male, you're creating a super female. That's really what we are. We're just a super. But where did that energy come from? Right? It came from suppressing all those things that females invest in. So
that makes sense.
Does that make sense?
Yep.
So it's really obvious where we take longer to grow, or we mature more slowly. We're much bigger, we're much faster, and we have lower repairability. Or women do the opposite. They have higher repair. That's why they live longer. It's because they have so much more DNA to repair with. So in any event, so, you're really, any event, growing a human is an incredibly complex thing, but if you want to compare how the sexes work, it's not complex. There's just a trade-off, and you have to figure out what was traded off. I mean, the clitoris to penis thing is always the one that makes the most amusement, right? The ovary to testicle thing always makes amusement, but those are the only complicated ones. The rest of it's sort of female horizontal brain and the male vertical brain. Just those are that, and then the rest of it's just hormonal, right? Which is the hormones continue to, the hormones provide the reward for the neurons to advance a particular bias, which serves the sexual and reproductive interest.
Right.
Really quite simple, really. And it's like, once you realize that you can, and if you take you take intelligence and personality traits, and it's all variation on the cable algorithm. I mean, it's just, you realize we're grow bots, and the bots are across the spectrum. And then once you realize, why are we so different? Well, we're different. Oh, we're not. We're different within a certain limit, but that limit is so that all of us are discovering every opportunity in the time, in time and space. Right. So
Right.
we unlike, bees have got, there's so many specialists, right? But they can only discover so many opportunities in time and space. Us, we can discover every fucking opportunity in time and space at human scale. I mean, if we can discover everything,
We got somebody working on that problem right now.
Yeah, there's
everywhere. Like, however ridiculous it may seem to you, right? We got the guy who's putting the models together inside the bottle.
Yeah, there's
Like,
somebody
I don't know
working
what
on that
value that
problem.
might have, but that might be important later.
Exactly. We're like, well, it seemed really ridiculous, but it turned out to have value, right? I mean, the reason that we can put the ship in the bottle is the same reason we can put a satellite that big out into the reaches of the solar system. It's the
Right,
same algorithm.
we need that guy.
Right? You don't know that craziness turns out to be true. Or my favorite ones, these mathematicians that come up with some extremely weird thing that I basically understand, at least in narrative form, right? And they come up with it. It turns out there's just a curious thing, but then 25 or 30 years later, it turns out it solves this incredibly difficult problem, and in some particular
Right.
place.
Well, you can't tell which is a stepping stone of immense value to the opportunity of the future, right?
Yeah, and so I just look at the sexes, right? The difference between the sexes and the verticality of the complexity of the exchanges going on, and that's just, tilted a little bit, and that's just the surface area of time and space. There's a couple of limits on it, right? But some of us, I mean, guys like me, I mean, other guys, we worry about millennia, right? We worry about decades and centuries and millennia. And some other people, they worry about the moment.
That's
Some
right.
people worry about yesterday. I mean, I don't know. I mean, we're all divide the time and space into this thing. And that's, once you understand what's going on, it's fucking magical. And when you're like, well, as long as they're not hurting anything, right? In other words, as long as it's truthful, reciprocal, whatever,
it's okay.
It's
as long
okay.
as it's not bad, it's good.
Yeah, as long as it's not bad, it's good. Because you never know. I mean, it's like the guy who developed Lexan, he did it by fucking accident. Lexan turned out to be a really valuable thing, but it was like, what came in the morning and it was a blob on the desk and it was unbreakable. I mean, how do you,
right. It's like the Teflon thing. Like, what happened here?
It's like, and then the guys are, some of these material science, this is my material scientists are my favorite people because they actually make a difference, right? I mean,
oh yeah.
I mean, the guys that are trying to make they're trying to make an imitation of the muscle. That's up there with batteries.
Oh,
right?
yeah.
A battery is a very important solution. The ability to make something that can imitate a muscle by low voltage electromagnetic stimulation, that's going to be huge, right? Those guys are really cool. I mean, this stuff about space, and the origin. I get so nauseous about some of this nonsense. It's ridiculous, right? but it's entertaining for people. They're not as interested in the, guy back in the 60s or 70s saying the fundamental problem for mankind is a battery, right? I mean, I can't remember who said it, but it was back in it's about the time that it was in the 60s, early 60s, right before 63, 64, somewhere in there, he said it. I'll probably get the time wrong and somebody will correct me, but it's like the fundamental problem for mankind is a battery that has the energy density of gasoline.
That would be wonderful.
Yeah, I mean, it would be insane, right? Especially if it wouldn't like event that, it's surprisingly hard to light a tank of gasoline on fire, believe it or not, right? I mean, make it explode. It's not surprisingly hard to make a battery vent all that energy really fast.
It's a sad thing to witness, man. See them all like repeatedly on the public channels. With the frequency of videography being what it is today, right?
Yes.
That is. Right, so what fascinated me recently is these propellerless aircraft. I've come across this high voltage electro propellant, solid state moving air. I'm like, ion drives. I'm like, that's cool. just interesting.
There's a point at which technology becomes magical enough that it troubles me.
It's just weird. Psychologically. Like, I wasn't expecting that. It's like, I'm sorry to have interrupted your train.
No, that's all right. I mean, we get a couple of things. We get feedback from people that they really like these digressions. So, I mean, it's not.
There's some value there. There's some value there.
I think it provides context for people. We probably should note that we look at the comments. We encourage comments, right?
Right.
And your participation in watching this is, hopefully it's valuable to the audience, but we appreciate when you do work, because frankly, Brad and I put a lot of work into this.
It's a lot of work. And it is fun. It's good. But
and part of what Brad and I do is we break this up into the first bit to be these conversational things, right? And then the second bit we do
get to
the grinding work, and hopefully that's a good mixture. But please submit comments, and of course, if you have things you think we should answer, you're welcome to. In other words, questions you think we should answer. I prefer to just answer them in text sometimes, right immediately in the comments. But if there's topics you think we should discuss, that's open too. So
yeah,
we should probably begin our shows with our chats with that.
Our necessary legend, right? The caption.
Yeah, please, we appreciate your participation. Look, understand the real reason we do this is Brad is trying to get me to finish the work, right? And that was we just started recording. We just started recording our working together. We had no intention of making a show out of this. And I get shit all the time for Curt. You always choose the lowest presentation quality. It's because, I'm not actually trying to make presentations. I'm just trying to hold a discourse. Basically, we're having a schoolyard conversation, or a bar conversation for that matter, or a dinner table conversation about these matters. And I really, if it became a production quality problem, I wouldn't do it, because it would distract from what we're trying to get done, which is get the work published.
I'm just here as a sheepdog, man, just trying to keep Curt in game.
Oh, it's working.
It's working. Now, here's the question.
Go ahead.
I was like this. It's like, do you want to break this into 2 bits, or do you want it one?
I think we'll break it. Stop the chat. Stop it, and then we'll start a new chat, right? If you do
we can do 2 videos then. That's fine.
But I don't want to. I want to finish with this issue.
That's fine.
This is an important issue. So I'm going to share my screen if you'll let me.
Okay.
So this is what I want to. What did I do? You are the host now. What did I do? Close. Oh, I hit the chat button by accident. All right. let's go up here. Share screen.
Not there yet. There we go.
I
What's
have
the
to get your,
program?
I need your handsome face back on my screen. Where are you? There you are.
Right.
I mean, and I am being generous.
I know.
Shit, I thought I was going to get that by you. I was positive. I could get
didn't
that
want to
out
draw
without
too
you
much
noticing.
attention to the generosity of it.
Oh shit! I can't get away with anything.
Sorry, buddy.
Oh, all right. So we've been through this before. Is that what's in the program, right? It's a methodology. The methodology produces a paradigm, first principles, vocabulary, logic, and grammar. We apply it to the spectrum of sciences. We apply it to the logic and law of civilizational differences. We end up with a completion of the scientific method. I don't know if I should do that. I think we should leave it the way it is here. It's a methodology that produces a value neutral language that completes the scientific method. And then we apply it to the disciplines, right? In doing so, by comparing civilizational differences, we discover the reason for the disproportionate rate of evolution of Western civilization compared to all others, and the high cost of it. We identify then the problem went wrong in the past century. We try to, I should say, it shouldn't go there. This should be organized differently. And then we produce a set of reforms that correct for what went wrong in the century. But the purpose of this is to drive us all to truthful reciprocal exchanges despite our differences, because it isn't the only thing we can do is trade when we can't agree. And when we can sometimes agree, we can sometimes compromise, and we can sometimes trade. And in some cases we have, because commons are so important to each group, we might need to separate to produce commons and then trade goods, resources, and information. Goods, services, and information. That's what this is. It's just how do you solve the problem? I don't know what else to say.
So I'm trying to figure out where you hid the Nazi in there.
Something Nazi. No,
I know.
the problem of Nazi is really simple.
Okay.
Is that there's no claim that we are one. Instead, we are a bunch of federations,
Right.
of common interest. There's no obligation to one another. There's only there's no obligation that allows the extraction from one another.
Which is, there's no pre-existing duty
Right.
between individuals that I don't
It's
know.
really families, but yeah.
Right.
So that's number one. They don't like that because they want there to be an obligation between us de facto rather than a utility of cooperation.
That's the hidden Nazi, is how they're viewing it.
Well, that's the first. There's the second one.
Okay.
And so the net result is that it's self-determination by self-determined means, by reciprocal assurance of self-determination by self-determined means, by force of arms to defend sovereignty and demonstrated interest, reciprocity and display word and deed, markets in all aspects of life, leading to the greatest condition of rate of adaptation, of innovation, adaptation, and evolution. Here comes the kicker: at the cost of the reproduction of those unfit for those markets.
That's the other hidden.
That's the gotcha.
That's
In other
right. There's a
words,
cost.
There's a cost. So what I'm going to get shit for is always is saying if you can't, there's no difference between natural selection in the market of nature and natural selection in the markets of man. Man is just an extension of nature. There's no difference. You can't, what they don't want to believe is that natural selection is necessary because mutation is random, regression of the mean is universal, and the defects end up in the lower classes, accumulating in the lower classes. The lower classes have the least incentive to self-regulate in order to contribute to the commons. So this is the fundamental problem. This is why I say that the thing that prevents any civilization from maturity, in other words, the great filter that makes the universe quiet, is very likely the same thing that makes advanced life possible, which is over investment or over ideological fantasy in the utility of universal value of an individual, right, to one another, and the failure to adopt eugenics once you've defeated the forces of nature. This is so what qualifies me as a Nazi is we're not there. We're not, we don't have a reason to, there is no natural binding between us except that binding which is utilitarian. There's no claim on one another. It's voluntary. There is no intrinsic value to man except that value which is demonstrated. And so the only thing we can do is reduce the reproduction of those who demonstrate their own.
I don't think that's necessary to phrase it in that form, because it is not that I need to expend energy to constrict, but rather to not contribute to expand.
Correct.
Which is to say, I reject the claims of that are made, which are I must provide sustenance for such purposes.
Correct.
Because it's not a reasonable request. It's not
So
a reciprocal
if
exchange.
that doesn't make me a Nazi, it makes me an American because we came up with it. Right? That the liberals were eugenicists until Hitler.
Yes,
because Hitler took it to an extreme. He didn't say we need to limit the reproduction of the unfit. He said we need to put people in camps, ship them elsewhere, and kill everyone, and then artificially remanage the production of white blonde babies. I mean, it's kind of, that's a via positiva, whereas eugenics is natural eugenics or natural selection is a via negativa. It's don't do anything bad.
Right, and so I avoid the subject of Mr. Hitler. I don't like.
Well, no, I mean, but that's where they're coming from. They're just calling me a Nazi, and I'm like, I'm a fucking libertarian. I'm a classical liberal. I mean, as Hayek would call himself a classical liberal, but he said, I consider myself a libertarian. But then you got Rothbard saying, well, he's a libertarian, but he's not, because he has no sense of he's not. It's not about the commons. So to me, I just go with I'm the same problem Hayek has. As far as I understand, and I'm a classical liberal, which is a conservative classical liberal, which is a Burkean conservative, right? I mean, we can't. We want to maximize that public participation, which is competent to participate, right? That's all, right? At the point at which you're no longer competent to via positiva participate, you need only the only political power you need is the via negative of the court to prevent yourself from harms. But if you can't demonstrate your competency to participate in production of commons, then there's no value to your participate in the commons. And the only way to know something is demonstrated. Otherwise, you end up like the Chinese, which is like having some credentialized test, or like we have today, which is credentialism. Except the credentialism people turn out to be wrong almost all the time. mean, you know, it's like, I love I mean, I'm kind of a fan of Ray Dalio, right?
Yes.
You know, he's like a C student or whatever, and right, and it's because they don't believe stupid things. Because in business and finance, you can't afford to believe stupid things, but credentialed people can afford to believe stupid things.
I guess there's too much slack in the system then, right?
Yeah.
Oh my.
So if I've said here what's in the program, that's what's in the fucking program.
That's it.
That's all there is. There's nothing, it's not fucking complicated. Now, the hard for people to understand is that we're driving toward producing a government where we produce trades, right? The government should consist of houses of the commons, right? And those houses of the commons should produce trades that produce commons. Period. I mean, it's not a problem. The market for goods and services can produce goods and services. Does that mean that we can't use half of the social democratic or half of the national socialist policies to be able to bring about a better world? National socialism, in the sense that they meant it originally, is just meaning that there's state private venture involved and that there's a heavy suppression of privatization of resources, public resources, for private capital goods. Does that make sense? There's a more private public partnership. Well, I mean, I advocate for public partnership. I just argue that the government tends to be really bad at management, even if it's really good at financing. Right? I mean, that's just the evidence. So I advocate for a government that works more like our venture capitalist industry. And our venture capitalists in the government try to produce those long-term returns that can't be produced other means. I advocate that the Treasury is paid for by this investment. In other words, our healthcare, we want healthcare. We want all these other things, right? There's no reason it can't be paid for if the government's actually responsible for generating revenue. Right? So does this make sense?
It's pinging me too close to home. I'm like, it's
Oh yeah,
irritating my soul,
sorry.
man. It's like I'm having internal reflections of painful conversations, or
Sorry.
or how about confessions to patients. The confessions this week, I'll tell you the painful confession this week, so you'll be the patient, is in the examination room, right? I just want you to know, Curt, you're not number one in this room. And I want you to know I'm not number one in this room. Now, you're number one to me for this exchange for medical services, but that's way down on the list of important things for the people on the other side of the computer who are telling me how I must do it or I'm going to get in trouble. And it's regulating our interaction in this room and how we deal with it. It's just painful. It's expensive. And I look at it. We had the state inspector come in the building, and it was like the state inspector did a great job of being a state inspector, which didn't do anything, just took a lap and left. It's like, that's as good as it gets. And it's credentialism. You got your little check mark in the box and you're good to go again. Right?
Yeah, of course, you gotta understand that the reason they do, it's just one of those problems. It's really obvious where bad shit's happening in medicine, right? And so, but they have to go visit everybody and put the check mark in so they can visit the 10% of places who cause all the shit.
I suppose just like this, I'm okay. As long as they did it perfectly. Now I avoided any interaction with I was talking to my sister on the phone, and I saw the inspector coming toward our building, and I went around. I was outside. I went around the building, and I just was gone, and they were gone when I got back. And I'm like, that's perfect. No interaction. So I'm ready to break to the next sequence.
Okay, I just want to confirm. Did this get you anywhere closer to your?
Yeah, that's a very useful thing. So see, I made note of the timestamp, and I know what to look for, and it will provide great fodder for my white paper.
Okay, great. That's what I was trying to answer.
You did a great job, and
All
I'm
right, so let's take a break and we'll come back and work on on the more on the law.
all right, all right, and
I'll
then
get a new cup of coffee.
that's right. I'll see you in a minute.
Yep.